Hey guys, John Paulamy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday, October 16th, and this is the weekly market update. The disclaimer: anything that you hear or see on this video or here on the podcast is not to be taken as investment advice. I am not an investment advisor. This is for informational and educational purposes only. I'm just a guy on the internet. You should do your own due diligence. It's your money. It's your responsibility. So before I get started, I just want to talk about, again, if you are interested in the reality check, I don't make it part of the YouTube videos anymore because of the fact that some of the things I talk about, the AI on YouTube will not allow. And so my videos get suppressed or I get warnings. And so what I did is I do the reality checks as a separate video series. There are links below that will take you to the other services that will allow for discussion, free speech. And I encourage, if that's something that you're interested in, again, if you're new to this channel, you may not particularly care for the reality check. It's very highly politicized. It's very highly opinionated. It's going to be very contrary to what the mainstream discusses. So know that going in. Most of the long-time listeners, viewers that have an interest in that know this. It's not, for everyone. So know that going in. Please don't bring your comments back here that you don't like it. Make your comments there. I'm not interested if you like it or don't like it. Like I said, it's a product, it's a service that some folks like, and that I use to get out information that's not, we can't put out on mainstream type platforms. So having said that, let's get into this week's news and update. So we know about the ongoing, we're now in a full-blown energy crisis. There's no doubt about it. I think we've been talking about this for a while. I've been priming you folks for this for over a year. It's starting to come, unfortunately, to fruition. I'm not sitting here gleefully rubbing my hands together about what good fortune we have. I don't control public policy. No one calls me. No one cares what I think. So it's my objective or my responsibility to talk about things and try to forecast based on my experience, based on what I'm seeing, so that we can take advantage of it. There's no reason to just sit here and not take advantage of it. I don't look at that as being parasitical. I don't look at it as a bad thing. I didn't create the problem, and I have to get my people through this, my tribe through this, the tribe being you folks that listen to this. And I try to make, we got to make money, right? We got to go out and hunt, and we got to, we only eat if we kill. So I hate to be that blunt about it, but there are tens of millions of people that are being put into bad circumstances right now with what's going on in this country and around the world. And for many people, I will tell you that the things that we've discussed on here and some of the ideas and trades that we've talked about have changed people's lives financially and have allowed people to have more options. Let's put it that way. And that's really the whole goal of wealth creation, is to give us more options, give us more control of our time for whatever reason we want to use it for: family, church, stapling cardboard to sticks and protesting, whatever it is that you want to do, so that you're not beholden. So you have choices, you have options. That's really the whole thing. It's not so we can flex with a Rolex or get a Lambo or make videos of us with, 4 or 5, Instagram models flying on a Learjet. I guess folks are into that. It's their business, but it's to give us options and allow us to do things and take care of people that we want to take care of. So that's the whole idea. So here we are. This is, come on, man. That's Joe Biden. When he was on his no malarkey tour, he used to say stuff like this when he thought something was strange or weird or goofy. And so we have a report from Reuters here. The White House asks U.S. oil and gas companies to help lower fuel costs. LOL. I like what this particular guy says, GreekFire23 off Twitter. That's like punching a guy in the face, then asking him to help you move out of your apartment. And it is really, because this administration has come in beholden to the progressive left wing, the proto-Marxists, the Bolsheviks, the twits and nitwits and unthinking people in their party that want to, shut off fossil fuels, want to get rid of oil and gas, want to get rid of coal, want to have this great leap forward to the green energy nirvana with no idea how to get from A to Z. Just shut everything down and it'll just happen, because we can centrally plan it and we can just dictate it by passing legislation. Now we're finding out that that's not true. And so now we have the administration, we've reported on this in the past, going to Saudi Arabia, begging them and OPEC to pump more oil. Now they're asking US oil and gas companies to help lower fuel costs. Good luck with this. I mean, the oil and gas companies have been demonized. They have been used as whipping posts. They've been used as political fodder by this administration and by people seeking power. And now, as the fuel prices, we're heading into an energy crisis, this is going to tank their little plans. It's going to tank their political careers. I can tell you right now, the forecast that I'm looking at looks like some warming time here in the next couple of weeks, but as we thought might happen, early arrival of cold temperatures in November, below average in the US. And so you're going to see, I think, over the next 10 years, a realignment of the world, not necessarily the way you think is the best, but it's going to happen. This is ridiculous. These people in government wanted this. They wanted fossil fuels to go away. They're not thinking. They're not capable of thinking. They don't have the backgrounds or the knowledge. They're just politicians. They're there to grift. They're there to get rich. They're there to get power. And now it's turning against them. And I can tell you that, there's a good chance, unfortunately, that a lot of people are going to suffer this winter if it's bad, like I think, not just in the US, but around the world. You have natural gas prices at all-time highs in some places around the world. You have coal at all-time highs. You have shortages of coal in India and China, which is a primary fuel there going into winter. You have explosions in prices in oil. We have oil now, WTI, well over $80 a barrel. Brent closing in on $85 a barrel. Is it a little bit overbought? Yes. But, I still see people, denying that this is happening. And it is happening. And so, we've demonized it. We've beat it down. And the executives in the US have already said, Pioneer, we reported on, Oxy, both the CEOs have said that there's no appetite to go out and drill. Their deal is to, maintain production as best they can, blow down the production, cash flow, and return cash to shareholders. Why would you go out now? I mean, on the campaign trail, as part of the manifesto, the DNC and this administration said they were going to get rid of fossil fuels. And we have to go now because it's politically hurting them in the polls. I mean, this administration's collapsing in the polls. So now we're going to go hat in hand after we've, turned our back on Saudi Arabia. Now that we've demonized, because it was politically expedient, the fossil fuel industry in the United States and the whole West, now we're going to go to them and tell them, hey, can you bail us out, guys? And this is really a good analogy. It's like punching a guy in the face and asking to help you move out of your apartment. And so when gas is already, I've seen people are putting things on Twitter, high $3, $4.25, $5 a gallon right now. And I will tell you that we are definitely heading for over $100 a barrel. It's going to happen. I don't know how high. And another thing people need to realize is that prices for gasoline and these things, it's inelastic. And that means that you have to pay. You have to go where you need to go. So people have to pay. And so there eventually, I think if prices stay high enough and are sustained for a long enough period, capitalism will work if it's allowed to work. But these politicians can't keep their grubby little hands off it. Already they were talking about doing releases from the SPR. Well, that's not going to work. That's not a panacea. That's a limited amount. Then they were talking about banning oil exports, banning natural gas exports. These things aren't going to work. These are just more distortions that are created in the market. It has nothing to do with how much oil we produce. It's the type of oil that we produce relative to what can be processed in the refineries in the United States. And so if you don't have this knowledge because you don't know anything and you've never been anywhere and you've never done anything, because all you do is just respond to the left wing of your party. As we speak, there's people trying to break into the Interior Department today, left-wing activists, a couple hundred there protesting with pieces of paper on sticks about that the administration is not advancing to a Green New Deal fast enough for them. They're trying to break into the Interior Department. You're not seeing that on the news. It's on Twitter. Is that an insurrection? That's just a protest. And, they're complaining because they've only got 2 or 3 minutes or 4 minutes with Biden to talk about their agenda. Yeah, because right now his political fortunes are going down the drain. Okay. He wiped off on him, used him for what he needed to get elected. And now, he's trying to stay afloat, or whoever's controlling things, Susan Rice and Barack Obama, whoever is, writing the cue cards for Joe to read. And so we have a bunch of people that really don't know how things work, with their hands on the levers and pushing the buttons. And, it's just like Gosplan. We've talked about this before, the Soviet Union. You cannot get in there and, manipulate things and cause distortions, and they start piling up, distortion upon distortion, market manipulations, market distortions, and then you have this big mess. And I can tell you right now, I'm not so much concerned about the prices because it'll benefit us. People are going to suffer. People are going to suffer if things are as bad as I think. I've already seen articles where people are having to choose between food and fuel in the UK, for example. And, this whole thing could set off revolutions in developing countries. People in the developing world don't live like you, where you only spend, 10% of your earnings or 5% or whatever on food and fuel. Half their money goes for this or more. They're living hand to mouth. And so when food prices go up 30 or 40% like they have this year, that's a problem. And the governments fall over this. So, this is kind of funny in one way because they're getting what they exactly, people don't get what they deserve. They get what the people get what they deserve, not what they want. And this administration is doing everything wrong. Okay. And then expecting, a different result. It's asinine. It's sad. So article in Zero Hedge talking about links to these articles. I will get the links on this week. Last week I got cattywampus and deleted the links before I got them on there, but I'll do that. It's really important for me to put the links of where I'm getting this information so you guys can go look at this stuff yourself and see if, I'm distorting the facts, if I have a different view. And if you have a different view, this is not me, Sermon on the Mount where I'm, telling you and you don't know. This is a conversation. I'm just a guy on the internet. It's one man's opinion. So article on Zero Hedge talking about uranium, the most asymmetric trade for the coming years. This is what the hedge funds are saying now. Well, we've been saying this since this channel's been up. That's why we have, stocks closing in on 1,000% gains. But, this is what we needed to see, right? For us to really supercharge things and get things really moving to a real bull market. The smart money, us, was in very early, and we had to sit there and we had to have the doubts and we had to, wonder if we were right. And we had to parse every piece of information and, run it through, run it through our brain back and forth. Is this, and, now it's happening in real time. And so now opportunistic money's coming in, generalist investors, hedge funds, family offices. So what's the article say? The recent global energy crisis has once again turned global attention to nuclear power as an efficient alternative to unreliable green energy. I didn't say that. They did in the article. With countries from Japan to Finland and France hinting they are making preparations to restart MPPs, nuclear power plants. Yeah, that's what we've been seeing. Macron in France gave a big speech this week, recommitting to nuclear and saying that they're going to continue building it out, the small modular reactors and such. Finland, similar. Japan, we'll talk about that in a slide later. As the FT wrote overnight, after years of stagnant prices, a 37% rally in prices for nuclear fuel uranium has helped attract investors back to the sector. Funds such as Ben Melkman's New York-based Light Sky Macro, Anchorage Capital, and Tribeca Investment Partners, who have emerged as positive on the outlook for the raw material, as a global energy crunch highlights the role of nuclear power in a transition away from fossil fuels. And echoing what we said a month ago, this drops down. Crayford said that, quote, the political fallout of this energy crisis will be greater willingness in the West to extend the life of the existing reactor fleet. It has focused governments on the benefits of secure supply of energy from the nuclear fleet. We expect that to lend support to prices. And this is what we've been talking about, right? We've talked about energy security is going to end up being not the transition to unreliables or rebuildables. The conversation is going to shift to energy security because you're going to see political turmoil. You're in the middle of a fourth turning anyways, okay? And you're going to see if goes down like I think, tremendous amount of political turmoil as it relates to if we have an energy crisis, if it continues on for any length of time and people starts really feeling the pain. And I think people have just about had enough of the post-World War II scam artists, neoliberal scam artists. And Davos man is seeing his dreams slip between his fingers based on this winter. It could be a good thing, actually. But this is what we were hoping for, right? As a generalist investor, we take positions early in asymmetric positions. Typically, nothing happens because we're usually, us and two other people are the only ones looking at the deal. And then as the thing slowly starts gaining subtraction, then you start seeing the big money. You get a 37% rally in prices. This is exactly what we thought would happen. The big money will start rolling in. And so it starts creating that flywheel effect, if you will, as Justin Huhn talked about. It starts feeding on itself, and it begets more positive news, higher returns, yada, 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 until you get into a full-blown bull market and eventually a blow-off bubble. So as we talk about oil, one of the things that there's a thesis out there that's growing and becoming more mainstream, if you will, is the fact of questioning, the call on OPEC will become important now as oil prices return to their pre-pandemic highs and make new highs in the first quarter of next year. As we've already talked about several times, and I just mentioned in this video, and I talked about it extensively last week, is that U.S. shale companies are not going to respond. They've made it quite clear, at least currently. That could change in the future. Anything can change. I suggest that if oil prices get to $120, $150 a barrel, if that happens, I suggest to you that people will be looking to bring on new wells. Already, a lot of private operators, your wildcatters, they're out there drilling right now, but that's not going to be sufficient to deal with the declines that we see every year and the new demand that's coming down the pipeline, so to speak. And so what we're seeing is that many OPEC countries are past peak oil. So here's a couple charts I'll show you and some commentary. Both Nigeria and Angola reached, these are big players in OPEC. Both Nigeria and Angola reached their respective peak oil years ago and won't be able to increase production easily. Nigeria internal consumption is also rising, leaving even less to export. It's happening in many producers, and exploration investment keeps falling since 2014. Again, as I've said probably 15,000 times, extractive industries require constant new capital to find and produce the new resources to replace the ones that were extracted. And this is a situation we're in. You're even to exacerbate this, at least in Nigeria's point of view, you have consumption inside Nigeria increasing. This is exactly what we saw happen in Mexico. Okay, Mexico was a major player, exporter. It's been in decline, and they have not been able to recover. Okay, the previous administration there was trying to privatize the oil industry, trying to bring in capital, and the new regime took over and they decided to reverse all that. And so state-owned, state companies are very slow to be able to do this. These countries are developing countries for the most part. They're relying on the revenue from oil to not only, well, the politicians are stealing a certain amount of it, obviously, but they're relying on it to pay the freight, if you will, for the social programs and to keep themselves in power, to keep the populace, inbred to circuses. And so, in the salad days, that was great, but now you have to keep investing, and they haven't been able to do that, or they've chosen not to do it. And now we're seeing all across the world in a lot of basins declines. And so it's not just in Nigeria, it's in Angola also. And, these are not positive trends. As I said before, if you take this, as Exxon has said in a paper, assume 6 to 7% natural decline across the whole world collectively. If you get at 100 million barrels, you have to find another 6-7 million barrels a year just to replace what has depleted. Plus, add on growth of 1 to 1.5%. That's another 7 million barrels. So you're looking for, almost a new Iraq or Saudi Arabia every year, each and every year. And that's hundreds and hundreds of, that's $700-800 billion a year of new capital that has, or recycled capital, or capital that needs to be invested that has not been happening. We have not seen that for many, many years. And so the declines have caught up with us. And then we had this fantasy that was promulgated by Davos, man, and various inept and stupid politicians that said, well, we don't need to do that because we're going to go to a new green era, the great leap forward to the green energy and zero carbon. Oops, something happened on the way to Nirvana. And we found out that if you don't have any common sense, or if you read about energy transitions like I have, they don't just happen in a year or over the term of an administration or a 2-year congressional cycle. They happen over decades. And so no thought was given that, we have to have a policy to get us there. We're having central planning where the government's going to decide the winners. If you're really serious about this, you just put a big carbon tax on it and let the market figure it out. But, politicians don't like the market, right? Because, it gives them outcomes that aren't positive for their political career. If you put a $50 a barrel tax on oil and the price of gasoline went to $7 or $8 a gallon, that will solve the problem over 5 to 10 years, but you won't be in power. Some demagogue will come along because Boobus doesn't want any pain, doesn't want to change. Okay. And somebody will come along and tell them they don't have to change. And so that's who they'll vote for. So, this is how it is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. It doesn't matter what I want to happen. It doesn't matter what I think should happen. It only matters what's going to happen. And you're going to have a full-blown energy crisis that's going to be very, very bad, my opinion. And there'll be chances most people will suffer, and some people will make generational wealth that will be able to get them and their family members and friends and people they care about over the hump. It's that simple, really. This isn't going to solve itself unless tremendous amounts of investment are made. Going and begging Saudi Arabia to pump more oil isn't going to do it. They can't pump any more oil. Okay, they're constrained. Their oil fields. You should read Twilight in the Desert by Matt Simmons, where he tried to go in. He was a guy that knew a lot about Saudi Arabia. He's died of a heart attack pretty soon after he published that. It was back in the 2010, maybe 10 years ago or more. And he was talking about peak oil, and that kind of went away right after the shale. This little shale phenomenon we had over the last 8 to 10 years really obfuscated the fact that, this depleting asset that we really need to think about, and how important it is to our life and our modern life, and how it sustains civilization, allows for civilization, and how we've taken it for granted and squandered it. And now we're going to find out that the hard way. So again, our thesis is now going mainstream, that there's an energy crisis. This is Javier Blas. Please follow him on Twitter. He's very, very plugged in to the energy. He has a pretty good book too about the resource market and some of these things we talk about. I find most of his tweets are very, very informative and useful. But here's what he says. Here's he's quoting the IEA here. IEA, International Energy Administration or Agency, that was basically put into effect after the Arab oil embargoes of the early 70s when prices spiked the first time, says on its monthly market report that, quote, ongoing energy crisis, unquote. They said it. The IEA is saying it. The ongoing energy crisis will boost oil demand by 500,000 barrels a day over the next 6 months as record gas, coal, and electricity prices trigger fuel switching. Global oil demand in 2022 to rise to a record high, by the way. Yep, that's exactly right. So you're already seeing it, right? You're seeing fuel switching, people that can burn. You know, we've talked about in power plants how if you have a dual fuel boiler, or if you change out the burners or the guns in the burner, sometimes you can shift between oil and gas or pulverized coal. Some plants are set up for this, not all of them, but that's happening. People are going out and buying their own generators. If you're a manufacturing facility in China or Vietnam or one of these places, or India, you know, and you don't have, you know, the grid keeps going up and down and you're trying to meet your orders, you're trying to keep your business run, you know, you're going to go get yourself a 3608 cat or something, and you're going to put that sucker on a skid next to your building, hot wire it in to your distro box and try to run that sucker off diesel. And that's what's going to happen. And you extrapolate that across major portions of the world, and that's how, I actually think it'll be higher than 500,000 barrels a day. I've seen estimates of 1 million to 1.5 million barrels a day, and one outlier of 2 million barrels a day. I mean, this is, you know, this is really happening, and the IEA is now saying that, something we've been saying for a while. So it's going mainstream. The generalist investors are shifting back. The best performing sector in the market this year is in fact energy. It's that simple. And if you're not in that sector, you're going to get clipped if you're in running a generalist fund. And no one's going to care about ESG and all this crap. They care about the bottom line is always the bottom line. Sorry, not sorry. So we've talked about this before. The elections in Japan, they're very positive for the reemergence of the nuclear industry, the generation industry, nuclear generation industry in Japan. Linked to this article also. A decade has passed since the nuclear reactor disaster at Fukushima in Japan, but something, well, seismic seems to be unfolding in Japanese politics. The country has a new prime minister, Fumio Kishida, who seems ready to turn the page on the country's post-Fukushima shutdown of its nuclear power industry. It's not because he has no choice, or the country is going to be starved for energy. The LNG prices are through the roof. I've told you this. They're the equivalent of $200 to $250 barrel oil. No economy can run on that for very long. So he has no choice. And what we've talked about before is we're shifting away from an era of plenty to an era of scarcity because of the lack of investment, because of the dumb choices we made by listening to people that weren't qualified and allowing them to make policy. We're going to pay the price for that now. It can be fixed, and it will be fixed, but it's going to take a tremendous amount of effort and capital and time. Last week, industry minister, I can't pronounce these guys' names, said nuclear power was, quote, indispensable when we think about how we can ensure a stable and affordable electrical supply while addressing climate change. Okay, they always stick that in there about climate change. They're more worried about stable and affordable electricity, because if the lights go out in Japan and stay off, that's a first world country. The people will not accept it. It's that simple. They could care less about global emissions. Sitting there in January in Tokyo or Yokohama or Osaka is not going to be acceptable. It's just that simple. They're not going to riot, the Japanese, but they will, people respond to these things, okay? When people start having to feel pain, they will respond. He had a simple pledge. The government probably will not build anything new, but, quote, we will work to restart Japan's nuclear, nuclear reactors. So, yeah, they don't have a choice. I don't believe this either. I think what you'll see is they'll start the reactors, Some more time will go by, then they'll slowly, start building out. Japan is in a unique situation, is that it has basically no natural resources of its own. If you study the origins of World War II and Japanese expansionism in the 30s in East Asia and in Manchuria, it was a resource grab. They were starved for resources. So instead of trading and seeking mutual advantage, they just went in and took the stuff. So I don't say that's going to happen now, but what I'm trying to tell you is they don't have resources. I lived in Japan for 3 years in the late 80s, and it doesn't make me a Japan expert, but I saw that, it's very, very, very efficiently run economy. Everything runs fine on time. It's clean, and that requires a tremendous amount of energy, right? What is energy? We use it constructively to hold back entropy and chaos. And so you're not going to have blackouts there, chronic blackouts and all this stuff. It's just not going to be acceptable. So the Japanese people, I think, will fall in line on this, and you'll see. And this is something that was necessarily, I think, fully incorporated into people's models, right? We kind of had this vague notion that Japanese reactors would come back online at some point, but we were never really sure what the timeline was in this. So Japan is, you're seeing this just overall in the world everywhere, right? Everybody is going to nuclear now. Everybody's going back to it. And this is very bullish for us in uranium. There simply isn't going to be enough uranium. Now, there's plenty of uranium in the earth. We're not going to run out of uranium. Again, you can't just snap your fingers and create a uranium mine. So this represents a window of opportunity where a tremendous amount of wealth is going to be created. So Patrick Moore was one of the founders of Greenpeace. I follow him on Twitter too. Kind of a voice of, reason, if you will, an environmentalist, a conservationalist, but not crazy about it. Not just, let's go back and live like hobbits type nonsense. And so he talks about this paper, which I'll put a link to. Professor, I can't pronounce this guy's name either, states that achieving net zero policy is, quote, almost certain to fail. I would drop the almost. It is certainly certain to fail with no ifs, ands, or buts about it, period. I'll put a link to the paper that Professor Galgotki wrote. This kind of dovetails into the interview I did with Professor Michael Kelly, Professor Emeritus of Engineering at Cambridge, where he wrote a paper that's similar to this professor's. And what's interesting is these guys are not scientists. Dr. Kelly and this professor are not scientists. They're engineers. Okay, it's fascinating to see what scientists say one thing, these, visions of, Tom Swift and Elon Musk are going to save us, and the things they concoct in the lab, and then real life engineers who have to put the math to it and say, there's not any way to make this really work in real life. And that's what's so fascinating. The scientists say one thing, yes, we can sit here and pontificate and show you in the lab how we could get there. But the engineers are then like, well, how is this supposed to happen in real life? I can't do this. There's not enough material. The losses on the energy conversion. I mean, it just goes on and on. The paper's only about 14 or 20 pages. I'll put a link to it. I'll also put a link to the interview I did with Professor Kelly. I believe it was about 6 months ago or maybe a year ago. It's the same thing. It's like they can't figure out how you get there. And they're not dumb guys. These guys are like Oxford and Cambridge, educated professors of engineering, and they can't figure it out. So it's not just John saying that. So I don't necessarily agree with everything in the paper. Some of the stuff is a little bit, a couple of things are like not really relevant, but the overall gist is, how do you get from A to Z? No one can explain how to do that. And so we've ignored what works, and it's jumping up and biting us in the butt because we ignored it for so long, i.e., fossil fuels, are having a rational discussion about, energy policy. And quite frankly, energy security. And that's what we're going to talk about here. Here is a excerpt, and I'll go and share a better, easier to see so I can read it. Okay, this was a paper from the Chinese Communist Party talking about some of the things we've been talking about. This is premier Li Keqiang chairing the meeting of National Energy Commission. This is in China. This is a press release. And look down here, right? As industrialization and urbanization advance further at the current stage, energy demand will inevitably continue to grow, and supply shortage is the biggest energy insecurity. Energy security should be the premise on which a modern energy system is built, and the capacity for energy self-supply should be enhanced. Given the predominant place of coal in the country's energy and resource endowment, it is important to optimize the layout for the coal production capacity. Build advanced coal-fired power plants as appropriate, in line with development needs, and continue to phase out outdated coal plants in an orderly fashion. Does that give you any indication that they're moving to net zero? They just told you they're going to build more coal plants. Now they're going to hopefully get rid of the most dirty ones, or put bag houses and, and scrubbers on their stacks, but who's to say? What else do they say? Domestic oil and gas exploration development will be intensified. Does that sound like net zero to you? Does that sound like they're on board with the Green New Deal? Now, they do note further on in here that they're going to pull out the stops on everything, green energy, everything else. But they're not going to, China's not going away from fossil fuels. They can't. No country can currently. So I just wanted to bring this up. I'll put a link to it. What I always have said, and most of you guys know this, I've said, watch what people say or do, not what they say, right? So this whole concept of energy security as being the MO going forward, and you're not just hearing China say that, you're going to hear more and more of discussion. They're always going to throw on the end, like we did in that other quote with the Japanese, in order to meet our climate change goals. But they're never going to admit they were wrong, or they're going to get away from it. Okay, they're going to try to have their cake and eat it too, and they're not going to be able to do it. Okay, and so the investment now into energy security will be, I think, the winning ticket going forward. And politicians that emphasize that over a Green New Deal, I think, are going to find themselves being advantaged at the polls. It's just that simple. People are not going to put up or tolerate, even in China, which is a totalitarian. Well, it's not really, it is to a certain extent, things are controlled, but even they understand that, even in a totalitarian regime, you still have to have the general acquiescence of the population. If they're starving in the dark, that's not going to work out for the CCP. Just like it won't work out for Davos, man. Central planning doesn't work, folks. And Davos, man, had a plan, and it's not going to work. This winter is going to put one of the nails in the coffin. So to go on about what I was talking about, they're supposed to have a big climate change summit coming up. Xi Jinping expected to snub UK summit on climate crisis. Oops. Boris Johnson has been told that President Xi of China will not attend next month's critical climate change conference in Glasgow amid international pessimism that the event will be successful. Of course it's not. They just told you, they're going to keep building coal. They're going to keep intensifying exploration for oil and gas. They're still going to go all around the world and cut deals and make sure that the lights don't go out in China. Remember what we talked about a couple of videos ago? Make sure there's sufficient energy at, quote, any price, pay any price that you have to ensure that goal. In a setback to the ambitions of the COP26 summit, the Prime Minister has been advised by diplomats that Xi is not expected to join more than 100 other world leaders, including President Biden. So are the Chinese committed to zero? I mean, come on. It's time to wake up. Watch what people say or do, not what they say. The green mask is coming off the Chinese. It's already off the Indians. They've already told us they don't care. We have a right to industrialize, and we're going to use fossil fuels to do it. Suck on it. So, and this is like together, 3 billion people, almost half the world's population, basically telling you to suck on it. In the meantime, we're committing economic seppuku with carbon taxes and destroying our oil and gas sectors in Canada, the United States. And the problem is what most people don't understand. In order to have real net zero, in order to get these goals made, your standard of living needs to drop massively. Okay, that's what it means. Less energy usage. That's ultimately what it means. Are you prepared for that? So when you come outside the grocery store with your kid and somebody's standing with some person with blue hair and rings in their nose is asking you if you want to do something about climate change, you should ask them, well, how much is it going to cost? Because everybody wants to be against climate change. Looking at little shavers in the cart, rubbing them on his head. I want a better future for you, shavers. Of course, I don't want the world to burn up, but we already know from other polling that you don't want to pay for it. And you certainly don't want your living standard cut in half. That's what it would take. That's the calculations. That they haven't told you that, though. Okay, they just told you that this is, we're going to do this and it's for everybody's benefit. And oh, by the way, more than likely your standard of living needs to go down drastically, anywhere from 30 to 75%. Are you ready for that? Well, you're not. Are you willing to pay for it? No, you're not. And so the Chinese and Indians are not going to go that route. And so anything we do will be nullified by them. So why should we put ourselves at a disadvantage with people, especially the Chinese, who we're competing against around the world, and they're in ascension, wanting to assert themselves over the entire globe, and we're doing everything we can to blow cutting our arms and legs off. It makes no sense. And I think that the old feckless, I talked about this in the reality check last week. I compared the leadership in the United States, the old people, 80-year-old Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden bumbling around, 78 years old, the old line post-World War II, boomer leadership that's ineffective, feckless, neoliberal world order to self-enrich themselves and their friends in big business. That's going away. People have had enough of that. I compared it to the old Soviet apparatchiks at the end of the Soviet Union. Brezhnev, Cheryenko, and Andropov. They used to stand up there, all these old men, and one would drop and then the next one would be in there for 6 months, and then you wouldn't see him, and then here comes another one who's staggering up there. It was just doomed, just like this is doomed. We're going to have a change in leadership, and hopefully it'll be people that understand what's really going on, and not a bunch of old, ineffective, self-dealing people, which is what we have now. All right, last slide. Is the tide turning in tankers? I think so. Why? I already told you that I think we're going to be at record oil demand next year. Oil demand is going to continue increasing. OPEC keeps lifting their production. That requires more tankers. And now we're hopefully finally seeing a cycle of scrapping of tankers. This is the most tankers that have been scrapped since, back in 2018. This is positive. Hopefully this continues this trend and we get these old tankers out of there because, as I've talked about before, I think that we are due for a super cycle in this. And I think that when oil demand and oil supply continues to increase, or they try to increase it at least, the ability to move the oil around will hopefully lead to a recovery in tanker rates. And so I just wanted to get this up there. September saw the most oil tankers sent for scrapping since 2018. So we'll see if this trend continues. I did notice that over the last few weeks, the oil tanker stocks have been rallying. I don't know if that's just a general commodity thing or rallying with oil prices. I don't know. I really haven't seen a lot of news or information about rates, but hopefully this trend continues. This is one of the underperforming sectors in our portfolio, but I've held on to it because I have this view that that eventually the rest of the shipping industry is basically booming, and I suspect that tankers will eventually catch a bid, and we could see some head-turning returns. All right, guys, I believe that's this. Yes, that's it for this week. Appreciate your support. Appreciate the viewership. The channel continues to grow. I hope this is useful to you. We're going to keep doing this. And like I said, if you're interested in how we're turning these ideas, how we're getting ahead of the curve and beating the big hedge funds and getting into these things well before they do, consider a subscription to the Actionable Intelligence Alert newsletter. It's $150 per year, 12 issues, the back issues, the commentary. I think you'll find it useful, and you'll find that we get on these trends a lot earlier than everybody else. All right, guys, that's it for this week. Take care, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks.